Today on the Videomaker podcast, Chris and I talk all about podcasting. This actually is the 100th episode of the Videomaker podcast, and we thought we would talk a little bit about what we learned over the last 100 episodes about what it takes to be podcasters, make a podcast, but actually more specifically make a video podcast, which, I don't think either of us were expecting when we started that it would be so much more difficult than making a pure audio podcast. But we talk about the kind of the technical setup of a video podcast, what it's like to, or what you have to do to kind of host a podcast. And when I say host, I don't mean the thing that I'm doing now, but where the podcast lives on a server somewhere, how it gets out to all the platforms. We talk about marketing a podcast. We talk about guests versus not having guests, and we just have general tips for video podcasters in general. So hope you enjoy that. As always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it and you've been around for 100 episodes, please click the subscribe button in iTunes or Apple Music, not Apple Music, it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. It's really convenient for you and it's really helpful for us. So without number 100, and I'm tripping over my words. With that out of the way, let's get on with the show. But first I want to tell you about MPB. MPB is the world's largest online platform for used photography and videography equipment. MPB is a destination for everyone, whether you've just discovered your passion for visual storytelling or you're already a pro. MPB recirculates more than 300,000 items of used gear every year, extending the life and creative potential of photo and video equipment for visual storytellers around the world. Headquartered in the creative community of Brooklyn, the MPB team includes trained camera experts and seasoned photographers and videographers who bring their passion to work every day to deliver outstanding service. Every piece of kit is inspected carefully by their product specialists and comes with a 6-month warranty to give customers peace of mind that buying used doesn't mean sacrificing on quality or reliability. Visit mpb.com to find out more. Welcome to the Videomaker podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, is Chris Munlux.
Hello. Did the air just come on just as you started the podcast?
Is that the air conditioner? I feel like there's a
maybe there's a motor
or something.
It was like as soon as you said record, sound starts. Isn't that's the way it goes, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's like I don't know. It's
Newton's law, right?
Newton's law. Yeah,
I don't know.
We need to make this law about a podcaster generally. Like as soon as you start pressing record, strange sounds start happening in the background.
I think that's anytime you're recording audio. Like I've been at. Like, you never could hear the train before, but someday, because the weather was weird, all of a sudden you could hear the train and from inside, and you're like, I never did that. I needed to be really quiet. And it's not.
Yeah. And now that we're talking about it, I'm realizing I didn't turn the air conditioner off, so it could turn on any second. So I will try to do that before it happens. Oh, it's not turning on today. It's cool. It's cold outside. Yeah. So equipment changes this week. Our daily, our
update.
Regular equipment change update. New headphones.
Yeah, well, for you, and I have your old headphones, and then I get to take my personal headphones home now.
Oh, good. So I got these new Rode headphones.
Their very first in headphone.
Yeah. And so it's their first headphone. And have you tried these yet?
No, I mean, I think I put them over my ears just to kind of feel how they were. They felt... I guess DJ headphones would be the way I feel. Like they're nice and comfy. You feel like you could wear them for a while.
Yeah, I don't know anything about this. The first time I've put them on, 10 minutes ago, they feel comfortable to me. And I'm sure they won't for very long because I had, closed back headphones drive me crazy. They start to get
warm, or
I get ear fatigue real bad.
That makes some sense.
So we'll see how that goes. It's not a problem with the headphones; it's a problem with me.
Coolest feature though about it is we found out. I'm like, oh, are you wearing them correctly? Because we put headphones on, and sometimes you put the right on the left, or it doesn't matter, or what. I mean, it should matter, but in this case, we're listening to mono microphones. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And you can plug these in on either side.
Yeah, the cable that comes out of the earpiece could go in either earpiece.
And for some reason, that's like revolutionary to me. I was like, that's fantastic. That's a feature that like, I don't know how many times I've been like, oh man, if this cable was only on the other side, or like I've blamed the computer to like, oh, the output of the computer's on the left, yet the cable goes to my right ear. Why can those not be the same? But now they can be.
Yeah, I think that they're always the left, right? Is it just an industry standard the cable always comes out of the left?
I don't know if I've ever paid attention. Probably.
I think it is, because that's just the standard thing. I pick up a pair of headphones I've never used before. I put the one with the cable hanging out in my left hand, and boom, it's right every time. It's left every time.
Yeah. What would be cooler is if they're Bluetooth, but they're not.
Yeah.
So that would be one step. And then I really like, we have some Audio Technica Bluetooth headphones that we use at our desks, and they fold so you can like have the headphones down to your chest so they can be kind of comfortably around your neck when you don't have them on, which I like for traveling especially. But I haven't traveled with these, but the headphones I had before, they did that, and that's why I bought them. But
the only headphones I can really wear are the not even headphones. I wear the AirPods.
Yeah.
And I feel like even the non-Apple, earbud style headphones that I've worn are uncomfortable to me.
Yeah. It ended up being too hard for me. It wasn't until the AirPod Pro that I got that they are comfortable enough, and I could forget that I'm wearing them. They're that comfortable. So,
well, these sound good so far.
Cool. Your voice and my voice sound good.
Yeah, sounds great.
I'm noticing mine sounds better, but it's just different headphones.
Yeah. Okay, so today, this is an important episode.
A special episode?
Special. It's not very important, but it is special.
How important are we in general anyway? But
yeah.
But it's special to us because 100, and it's been like a little over 2 years.
Oh boy, I think so. I think we started in 2019.
Yeah, we definitely did start before the pandemic. I think we got quite a few episodes through. We might have gotten 30 episodes at 19.
Yeah, at the time we were doing them weekly.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised.
I even look back and on YouTube, it's got over 2,000 views. That first podcast. Which is the vidcast of the podcast, which has always been the hardest part of this whole process, which is, are people going to watch a video that they'd normally listen to?
Yeah.
But we've learned a lot of things, really.
Yeah, that's right. So we decided let's talk about that on the 100th episode. What kind of things did we learn about podcasting and making a video podcast, which... when we started doing the video podcast, I was thinking this is the future of podcasting is video.
Yeah.
Right. More and more people are doing it. Joe Rogan had like a huge YouTube channel, which now is gone practically. And I was like, everyone's going to be doing video podcasts. And we're a Videomaker. We can't not do video.
Yeah.
Right? And so here we are, 2 years later, still making video versions of this.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot about podcasting in general, but also how to do video with podcasts. So I figured let's let people know what we learned, I guess.
Yeah, so we started out with 3 test run podcasts, and it was Mike, Nicole, and I, and I think at that point we were all sitting next to each other in a row. We were trying to figure out how to produce it and make it all look right, and it was awkward, and our audio didn't sound good because we were close to each other, so you could hear everybody spill over and the other mic next to it. And we really wanted this like live to tape thing. We didn't want to have this thing we had to edit significantly before and afterwards. We want to be able to have it be as conversational as podcasts can be. And so we moved, and that was, I think that also we did an interview that I don't think we've ever published it. In fact, I don't think the whole thing even got completed, but that we did an interview. So we were doing it with somebody, and we were trying to do it with Zoom or Skype or something. Yeah. And it was a big pain in the butt. We didn't quite have it all working. We needed to have the computer far enough away to plug in and do, I can't quite remember all the different things, but it was like, one of us could see him and talk to him. He couldn't really see us. We didn't figure out any way to pipe our normal cameras in there. So he's just looking through the webcam. We're recording his audio, and we're trying to listen to it through our headphones. It's not coming through the computer. It's kind of some weird things that you wouldn't really think, oh man, this is going to be difficult. Because if it was just a podcast, you wouldn't have to worry about the video side, and it would be immensely easier because there are online sites that'll help you record on both sides and then give you a clean channel from one. And what did we use? Zencastr,
yeah.
Yeah, Zencastr. So Zencastr will record the audio on one side of the call so that you don't have to deal with the way it all sounds like over the internet. But the problem with that is the other side has to be recorded without that audio so that you can then put it back in and then everybody's voice sounds good. So at the time, we didn't have a multi-track the way we do now with the Rode podcaster. And so just even like, okay, I'm going to have to take these 4 separate tracks. Now we're going to have to mix them, put them with the video. What do we show? Is it a full screen with a picture-in-picture? How do we show these people and it be not awkward for all of us? It was a mess, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I was really like, no, this isn't fun. I don't like this. And it was way more podcasting than it was video. And video, it was just like GenSync and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that problem.
Yeah, so we did a whole recording, everything, and audio slips all over the place because we recorded with one thing, and we were plugged in with all these others, and it was just like you're gonna have to live with like a 30 milliseconds delay or something, but both on us hearing it, them talking, it just.
Yeah, the audio slipping was, just to kind of just find the difference here between the slipping and the desyncing, was that you would sync it up at the beginning of the video and it would be fine, but it was just off a little bit in terms of the timing, so that if you had an hour-long interview, it would get worse and worse and worse over time before you got to when you were watching the end of the interview, it was off by like 3 seconds or something crazy.
Yeah. I remember having this kind of drift when I was digitizing tapes of like, long interview. It's like, no, I'm gonna have to do this in chunks because it starts to the audio starts to kind of drift a little bit. And so we had that. So that was actually the issue of Zencastr versus our recordings back here. Even though they were set at the same bit rate and sample rate and all the rest, they still were having issues. So then we were recording with cameras and they weren't all the same camera. So there was a little bit there. And I think we had the aha moment because we decided we were going to make the mothership. And it was 3 desks put together, all facing each other. And then the cameras could be next to us, shooting someone across from us. We could light everybody well, because that was also difficult. How do you light 3 people right next to each other without one being poorly lit or whatnot? Man, just all sorts of frustrations. And so it finally took getting everything into our Sling studio, which we've been using pretty much for this the whole time, and then adding, which ended up, at the time, it was just a mixing board going into it, and now it's something that's got built-in compression and sound effects if we want to. I don't know if that actually, anybody can hear that, but anyway.
Did you hear sounds?
I didn't hear it, no. Here, let me turn it out. Let's see here. I think it's this thing. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
I did a good job.
We had so much fun with that one. Like, when you just got this thing, we should.
Yeah, here.
Every time we press a button on there, I think we should do it again. Get that going again. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think we. Oh, here.
Boring.
I think Haley put that one in there. So we were doing all that, and it was difficult, and I think we learned a lot of stuff about. Because it was so more than just a multicast or a multicam, production, because we didn't really necessarily have this hub where everything could go into. I think we wanted to use a TriCaster Mini we had, but it wasn't working properly. It was having squealing audio. We didn't want to put you guys through that. And it was really like, we're putting all this together with the bits and pieces of audio for video we have to try to do a podcast. And it wasn't really till we got the Procaster, I think is what it's called. Rodecaster, that's what it is. Podcaster.
The trick that ended up solving it with the Sling Studio was the fact that the Sling was recording everything in one system.
Yes.
And whenever we were recording everything separately, and trying to sync them up afterwards, that's where things fell apart. So as soon as we could get everything into a single system and hit a single record button, problem solved.
Yeah. And if, like, say we were just doing Zencastr, that would have been easy, right? Because it would have been audio on one side, all on the other. We put them together, shabamo. You don't have to worry about lining them up with video. Yeah. And so it was like, oh, it's the video that's causing us frustrations in launching our podcast.
Yeah. And you might ask, well, what's the big deal about shooting all these people sitting in a circle versus, being in a straight line, or, having everyone be able to see the interview subject and all that. That was a big thing. Like, if this was an audio only podcast, I think with multiple people involved, so when I say multiple, I really mean more than 2, the video component is still immensely important. And the reason is you get a lot of clues from from people when you're communicating, when you can see their face.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why this kind of works in this mode now is Chris and I are sitting across from each other on a table, and we can see each other's faces, and I can tell when Chris wants to say something by his mannerisms, and how he's sitting there and how he's about to, he's leaning forward towards the microphone. I can pause, and Chris jumps in and back and forth. But if anyone is listening has ever taken part in like a conference call with telephones, know that people are always stepping on each other's toes, right? Talking over each other. That's because they can't see each other. I mean, actually Zoom and Google Meet and all these other video conferencing tools that we're all accustomed with now has really helped the conference call generally, right? Because we can all see each other and we don't have those communication issues.
Not as much, at least. I mean, I think there's still a little bit of like the tiptoeing. Oh, you get started, and it's more than you would have in one place, just because of a little bit of delay on the internet. Yeah. But it's nothing like it. I mean, I remember sitting on conference calls with multiple people, and you're like, "Why am I here?"
Yeah.
Unless I just need to listen.
Yeah, and the same thing happens on podcasts, obviously. So when it was Chris and Nicole and I, we found that actually sitting around in a circle helped that when we're communicating with one another, right? In that we can tell when another person is ready to jump in, but also we needed to see each other, and we also needed to see our guest if we were doing an interview, because they would have the same thing. Like we could be talking amongst the three of us, and our guest might be waiting to jump in, and if we could see their mannerisms, we would be able to, acknowledge that and let them jump in without having to like say, "Hey, Chris, so-and-so wants to talk now." So we had to see each other, and we had to all see the subject. And I think that we would want to do that even if there was no video component and we were just having audio only recording of someone else who was outside the building.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even them being able to see us being able to see them, and them being able to see us the same way we're seeing them is also important. Mm-hmm. So we ended up, adapting a computer and having our HDMI out go into a AJA UTAP, which converts HDMI into USB 3.0 and goes into the computer, can then be a webcam. So then they can see us the way we're looking at the cameras and whatnot. And then we had the output of that going into our Sling, so it could then be a full screen. Then we could just make someone another person in our multi-screen. And that was really our answer. I remember us doing a quad screen, I think, when we did interviews. We do a tri-screen. Now we got 2 screens. If we wouldn't have done 3 from the get-go, it would have been maybe a little easier. But it's more in the way of we didn't want to be cutting between. I remember doing a couple, we were trying to figure out when to switch the cameras when people were talking. And if we weren't really that organized in the who's talking about what, knowing which one to switch while you're also being on camera and having to talk and contribute was difficult. And these are things that we weren't necessarily like trained or well, like we could do the technical side. We were figuring that out, but then we had to figure out like the performance side of it. And it was like, if I got to be like looking at the screen and try doing that, I'm not really listening to you. I'm technically thinking about this. Mm-hmm. So it's like I'm detaching myself production wise from the thing I'm a part of. It's a kind of a mind screw there. Yeah,
you kind of need a director if you're going to do that kind of switching.
Yeah, and the whole idea of our podcast and vidcast from the get-go was to be able to make good quality content from the knowledge we have from the just deep, editorial coverage we do. And what we know is like, how do we make this in a way that we can produce it quickly? Because if I was going to make a video about anything, already I'm talking about multiple days to produce this thing. Unlikely you're going to make, any video worth watching, write it, shoot it, and edit it and have it ready in a day. That's just not going to be, maybe you can make a 30-second commercial, but it's not going to be something people are going to want to learn from or whatnot. And so that was really the goal here for us, is to make something that was interesting and worth doing. And it did take a while of figuring out. And I think we've learned each other's mannerisms. The fewer people sometimes is easier. Sometimes it's, when we have an interview with someone, you might not hear one of our voices much at all in the podcast, and we have to be okay with that. It's not necessarily like have 5 people that all can have something worth adding to the conversation, and then also do it in a way that's not stepping over everybody, because I don't think anybody wants to hear talking over one another. That's kind of an aggravating sound to me.
Yeah, it is. That's why I don't watch cable news.
Yeah, that's totally it.
So, we just rattled through quite a bit of, the technical history of what we've done here. The part we haven't discussed is the other side of the technical process, post and distribution.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't want to speak for you, Chris. I don't know, the first 20% of the podcasts I did the post for, so I know something about this. The post and the distribution is comparatively pretty simple compared to what we went through with the actual production.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because then it was just a normal thing, right? It was just process this video, edit it the way you want. And of course, we were trying to do, recording from each camera, then syncing them and doing all that kind of stuff. And now I trim. Now I find the beginning of our conversation, I bring the end of our conversation and, put in an intro and outro. And the post-production side of it is under an hour.
Yeah.
It might take more time for me to upload the videos to our video hosting site and to YouTube than it does to produce the actual content in post. The audio is super easy. I mean, once I even have the sequence done, which is maybe, 5-10 minutes, I'll put the audio and it's done. And then, there's just the waiting for the exports and making sure everything's nice and tight as far as that goes. Well, and everybody got to experience this the other day, which was I was using the same project in Premiere. And at some point I had written some automation into a track. And I just kept on writing and pasting. And eventually I was using that track because I needed to use it for something. And it muted us. And so half the thing was muted because of that. And so that's just kind of I should make individual, I was making new projects every time, but maybe I should make a new timeline for every one of these. And I wouldn't have ever thought of that if I hadn't done it 100 times over and over again. Man, we did our podcast from everybody from home. We actually did some really good ones. I think I remember doing, was it the Crib Camp interview? I think that was done from home during that time. And both the interviewers and us were all at home, which is really interesting. I think the thing that we could say taking away from having guests is what we would love to have is a little kit to send everybody to make it so that they could be presenting themselves the same as we do. So, microphone, maybe, like we said, that AJAU tap or some kind of HDMI to USB so people could use a dedicated camera instead of their webcam. But, we're seeing, luckily, because of the pandemic, we have started seeing a lot more people doing their news segments from home, from their phone or from whatever it is. So it's starting to become more acceptable in media in general. So it became actually easier just to accept that. But I remember at first we really wished that everybody looked as good as we could. But when they,
I think that all the time.
Yeah, I wish you all were just beautiful as me. I think it would have been nice to do that, but was it necessary? I think, I guess you get to a certain scale. Sure, for the Tonight Show, you want to make sure your guest looks great or, whatever. But if in our situation, I don't know if it would ever merit that, but it would have been real nice to be able to go here's your little toolkit to make it so that everything will look great and sound great.
Yeah, it's interesting because if we look at our process after it's recorded, or actually during recording, most of the effort goes towards making the video product.
Yeah.
And that goes from setting up the cameras to recording in our Sling Studio to editing the project to uploading it, uploading it to YouTube, uploading it to videomaker.com. And the audio portion is comparatively a cakewalk.
I mean, it's like the first part of the big work. It's like the setup work. I'm done with the audio part already.
Yes, exactly. And yet the vast majority of the listens happen on the audio only platforms. Yeah. One piece of advice I'd give anyone who's starting a podcast is at least to start, don't bother with the video. Although we have had a few breakout hits in the video space. So in particular, when we have interviewed YouTubers, we get a lot of YouTube views. Yeah,
and I think it's because the kind of conversations we're having with people are different than what most YouTubers are talking about when they're interviewed. I think we're talking about the nitty gritty instead of talking about directly their content or what they talked about or something like that.
So I have done a little bit of research on podcasts generally, and I learned that only a third of podcasts ever, all from all time have published more than 10 episodes.
Wow.
And Videomaker has a very small podcast. I mean, you would think. But we're actually apparently like in the top 5% of all podcasts worldwide. And that's because a lot of people make podcasts and they give up.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable to me now that we've got to 100, because if we're talking about audio-only podcasts, it's determination that's the only thing that gets you beyond a 10. There's no real limitations, I don't think, in terms of difficulty or technical limitations. I mean, yeah, you got to get a microphone, and this Rodecaster is pretty nice to have.
Yeah, I mean, we don't do any post-production because it's doing it in real time, but you can do that with a lot of different tools, not just this, but that's why we did it, right? So
yeah,
we could compress and make our audio sound good so that we don't do any post.
Yeah, so that's it's one of those things where maybe unlike YouTube, a lot of people start YouTube channels and they stick with it for a while. Anecdotally, it seems like people stick with YouTube longer than they stick with podcasts, which is remarkable. Maybe it's because podcasting is so easy to get started with, a little bit more difficult than on YouTube.
Oh, I don't know. If you ask if we could actually find out how many people made more than 10 videos on their YouTube channel.
Yeah,
it might be very similar.
Yeah, could be.
Because there's probably a whole bunch of them that have no videos, because they just have a YouTube account. But I think it's I think like even on YouTube, people aren't necessarily numbering their videos either. So when you've gotten to I think there's certain metrics that we use to evaluate what we're doing, and in podcasting, the scale is different than anything you would compare it to. The successful listens, sure, you could compare it to a Joe Rogan type of thing, but that's like comparing it to broadcast television. But that just doing it and getting and growing and continuing to have an audience and trying to make it better with every video you make, that's really all it takes, or every podcast that you make, analyze what you just did. Maybe it's just the reward system that is built in podcasts that keep people from getting past 10, oh man, I spent all that time and I only got 15 listeners. We're lucky that right off the bat, we have an audience, and that audience has been sustainable through, we're able to have a worthy amount of listens to merit the amount of effort and investment we make into the podcast.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we could I just got a few bits of info that we've learned along the way. So first thing, actually, we've talked quite a bit about our technical setup and trying to get things to work with interviews. And regular listeners will know that we haven't actually done interviews on a regular basis for quite some time.
Yeah.
I don't know how many episodes, 20 or 30 episodes before we were doing it every episode.
Yeah, we made a lot of effort into that in the outreach process of looking for people and trying to get people to interview is more time and effort than we do capturing one episode. I mean, it's a corresponding, trying to talk to an agent, especially if we're talking to anybody that has, a sizable audience. That those kinds of barriers take effort to get through.
Yeah. So one of the things we learned along the way is, for the most part, having a bunch of different types of guests on does not really help listenership.
Yeah.
I mean, the exceptions, I think we have 2 or 3 exceptions where we got someone who already had a big audience and they sent us some of that audience by telling their audience that they were a part of our show.
Yeah.
Outside of that, not much of an impact.
Yeah, I think it takes like the creator to have a community that is supportive of more than just the content in the videos. It's like a personal connection with the creator, and that they blessed us with telling their audience about our conversation, because without that, at least the two I'm thinking about, Neebs Gaming and Nolke, that those two, they shared it with their audience, and because of that, we got a lot back, and all the conversation and all the comments are about the person we're interviewing, not us at all. And so it's obvious they came here for them, not for necessarily the normal conversation we have.
Which is, you got to expect. I mean, you hope as a someone who's running a podcast that some of those people come back for the next episode when that guest is not on.
Yeah.
And I don't know how the whole podcast audience measurement thing is. The systems are not that robust.
Yeah.
So you can't really tell if people are coming back because they heard you on a previous episode with a celebrity they liked. But it's crazy because we would do all these episodes and we would work very hard to find guests, and then we would do some one-off episode about Chris and Mike BSing about whether they like Final Cut Pro or Premiere, and it would like blow them all out of the water.
Yeah.
And we just noticed that actually it's the topic that is more important than the guest. So it seemed.
Yeah, and that's and that makes sense if we compare it to the other content that we make. Yeah. Is the same thing. If we make content that people are looking for, they're going to be a part of it. And it doesn't necessarily take a gimmick. It just takes, a little audience research. And so, and we're still not perfecting any of that. We're still just grinding ahead because, one, I think it's helpful to get to talk about the industry. It's great to put our thoughts out there about products and that kind of thing, but also we find it really important to educate our audience and continue that. And I think this is just another form of that.
Yeah, and we will continue to do interviews whenever they seem appropriate.
Yeah, and we get emails all the time of ones, but they haven't offered me Spielberg yet, and that's what I'm waiting for.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy for us to look at a interview offer and determine, does this person bring value to our podcast and will this person teach our audience something, or is this like a PR scheme, right? Yeah. Like, are they just trying to get attention for whatever they're promoting or whatever? So we'll just be selective about it. I would like to maybe do something the next time we have a guest on. By streaming it live as kind of a way for our Videomaker.com members to experience that in a live setting. Not that it's much different, I guess. More exciting, I guess.
They could probably interject a question that we wouldn't have asked otherwise, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. So that might be something that comes down the road. But as far as tips for others, boy, at least at our level, the interviews not a big mover. At least, and it could just be our lane is really more about education than celebrity worship, which I like to think that it is.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
But at any rate, that's the thing with us. The other thing was like general marketing things that we've learned along the way in terms of getting new listeners. Actually, the best thing we have ever done to get new listeners is just be consistent. Like, we've tried a lot of things to try to get new listeners. None of them really move the needle in a major way other than just keeping at it. Keep going on. And I think from the get-go, at least my motivation, because I'm always on the technical side, is to have something that is worth listening to on a that sounds good, that technically sounds good, and isn't distracting. And that's why it's always been like, oh man, how do we overcome these technical issues? Well, we could have just accepted them, but it's that drive to make sure that every one you put out is as good as the last one, at least in the quality of listening wise. Maybe the content is hit or miss depending on what you're interested in. I think that's true. Even if it's really great content, you're not into audio, it's going to be a boring podcast for you if that's what you're talking about, So, but I've actually found the interesting thing is that we did some conversations with industry people that did, we talked to a gaffer or talked to people that are in the industry doing stuff. We had a sound designer, and that those actually did better than the ones that had, who the sound designer was important to people in a headlining way. It was that they got to say some really interesting real world information that you wouldn't have gotten if you hadn't talked to someone that was doing it. Yeah. So something that a lot of creators don't think too much about. When I say creator, I mean like independent creators, is the whole idea of marketing funnels. And for anyone who doesn't know the concept of marketing funnels, it's the idea that imagine a funnel, and the top of the funnel where the opening is wide, that's the thing that gets a lot of the audience. And at the bottom of the funnel is the few that have, made a purchase or done the thing that you want them to do, right? So lots of people enter the top, very few people exit the bottom. A lot of people think that media generally, whatever, no matter what you're doing, is kind of all at the same level. And maybe it is if you only make a podcast, it's both the top and the bottom of the funnel at the same time. But we have learned, considering we have a YouTube channel and we have a website and we have a newsletter and we have a podcast and we have a magazine, that podcast is actually closer to the bottom of the funnel than the top of the funnel. As in, not many people discover Videomaker via the podcast.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the podcast, they don't even begin listening to it until they're pretty familiar with Videomaker, generally. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's anyone listening now where that's not true. I'm sure there is, but for the most part, people discover us other ways, and then ultimately sometime down the road, a small percentage of them will listen to the podcast, which means that if you're an independent media creator, you got to think that there are other channels that are going to be better for top of funnel discovery. Podcasting is not a very discoverable format. Yeah. So when you're starting a brand new podcast, it's going to actually be pretty difficult for listeners to organically find it. That might be why so many podcasters give up before they reach the 10th episode, because they might make 9 episodes with no listeners. Yeah. It's really actually kind of a problem, I think, in the podcast industry, that discoverability is so bad.
Well, and I think for those that are listening to this, I think they're obviously the podcast listening type, I hope, right? But that's not everybody, right? So if they're podcast listener, they probably had times where they've heard a cool podcast, they told somebody about it, and they didn't care because they don't listen to podcasts. Yeah. Or it's like telling someone about a cool new TV show, and they're like, TV? Pfft. You're going on deaf ears, and so it's not like they'd ever come across it. Why would someone that doesn't watch TV ever come across a TV show? It's unlikely unless you're just sitting in a department store, if those things exist still, and a TV's playing and you got to see something. But I think the podcast. That's like Joe Rogan, for a good example, is if he was just a podcast, he would not be where he's at. It took the clips and the YouTube channel and for him, lots of guests saying crazy crap and him saying crazy crap that is very out there, that got headlines. And it took all of the news agencies and all those places that wrote about him to bring all the traffic to Joe Rogan. It wasn't just their marketing strategy that made it or whatever they paid for. Surely it was all the coverage of those things, and that's a very difficult thing to obtain in any kind of organic way unless you are that media outlet.
But you know what else, kind of circling back to the first thing that we were talking about, is the Joe Rogan podcast is on every day. I mean, talk about consistency.
Yeah, that's true. And they're having, similar just like any show that you watch. If you watch it every day and you're habitualized to having it as part of your day, they won. And that, not in a bad way for you didn't lose, I guess, but that's the hope by doing that habitual. It's just the same thing as Casey Neistat doing his daily vlogs. I doubt he would have ever caught on as quick. And you think about it, you got more darts to throw at the board. Eventually, you're going to get a bullseye. Yeah. The more darts you throw, even if you're blind.
I was at an industry conference last week, and I learned about a media company that was producing a news podcast in some very niche, small categories. I think it was a trade publication that had a podcast, but it had a small listenership in terms of every episode, but it was actually pretty successful because they did podcast every day. And it was only 90 seconds long. This is the crazy thing to me. They did a 90-second podcast every single day, and it was thriving. And even thinking about our own podcast, I'm almost certain that we would have many times the larger listenership if we could podcast daily. I just don't know if there's enough to talk about.
Or if we just made multiple part ones, so we were just doing a 10 or 15 minute podcasts versus doing more episodic that way than doing it. Because when we started out, we were doing an hour. We were doing a long show. And
this one might be an hour.
Yeah, maybe not. We've been going on, I think, about 37 minutes.
Oh, you got a timer. Okay.
Yeah. It's you have to know your format, and you have to know, luckily, I think for us, we're always thinking about our audience. So we kind of manifest an audience that way, I think, a little bit in the way of, we're already making it for a select type of person. So that type of person might find us in this way as well. Mm-hmm. But, I think that, if you hadn't heard about Videomaker before and you coming across us, how would you find us? That's the hard thing about podcasts is there's not, like we said, searchable ways to find news sites. It's really quite brilliant in how it's all distributed. I wish that I can make one video, upload it to one place, and it would distribute it via RSS feed to Facebook and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. I would love it. It would be so amazing. But there isn't. But that's how podcasts are. We upload it. What do we use? Buzzsprout.
Yep.
And it pushes it all the places that you would get. I mean, given there's only a few of them that really matter as far as the volume of people that are there. But in our case, every listen counts. So if you're listening to this, thank you. That's, one more towards our goal.
Yeah, I love that that podcasts are open like this with RSS feeds. Spotify really wants to undo this. I hope they fail.
Yeah, I do too.
YouTube wants to undo this. I hope they fail. The RSS system where you just have an RSS feed and you send it to all the platforms is wonderful. Yeah,
we don't need the corporate guys changing that, because if we had to upload this to more places because of the short amount of time we actually put into post, it would be multiplying the amount of time we put into it. It would be a factor to concern about if we had to send it to 7 different places instead of 1. Yeah. Not that it's super hard, but it's at least more work than it was before. And like I said, if I didn't have to put it to YouTube and to our video hosting at the same time, I actually can. I could probably go to the video host and they could put it on YouTube, but I'm doing them at the same time, so it's not that big a deal. But it would be nice for the content. Like when I write one description, it just goes over to the other. And you do that, and sometimes it works well when you're posting from something else. I know we've used a lot of scheduling programs for our social media, and just sometimes it doesn't work right. And with YouTube, once you made it public, you can make it not public, and that's it. You can't go changing the video. I guess you can change the content, the description, and that kind of stuff, but you're not going to re-upload the video because there's a mistake or something like that. So I tend to like to do it manually that way because of that.
Yeah. So, I think if we were to see more of these closed systems like Spotify wants to do and YouTube wants to do, we'd end up seeing more exclusivity, which I think is, it's bad for small-time creators when, the world runs on, you can only publish on Spotify, and if you publish there, you're not allowed to publish on YouTube.
Yeah.
So,
that would be hard. Although the one thing that all those corporate brands are going to could bring is the discoverability, right? So if you do have one place to go, and one place tends to be the final place, then it should be easier to search and find things because it's only one place to do that.
I feel like they can do that without having the exclusive.
I think you're right, but I think that'd be the justification that they would push. It's like, oh, this is a closed system, so everything's going to be better because nothing else has a factor in it. It's just our ideas. Unless your ideas suck, then you can't escape them.
Yeah, which is a thing, I guess.
Totally. Well, if Apple actually sucked, they'd go down like a lead balloon real quick.
That's right. Okay, well, we've probably rambled on about podcasting enough for today.
Yeah, this is because of this, because we made it to 100, you have to go find the video on YouTube and like it and comment on it. And then what else are we going to make you do?
I think everyone should go back and watch the first episode of the Videomaker podcast.
Yeah,
we called it live streaming is hard or something.
Yeah.
Did we live stream it, by the way? We couldn't have.
We might have. No,
we've
live streamed a couple times. Yeah. And I think we were really talking about multicam. I don't know. It was live streaming. It was.
Yeah.
It was that was just the topic we were talking about. But I don't even know what we talked about. I could have said something. I think
we were talking about the setup because we had just the first episode. The mothership was in place, and we had a wide angle shot showing the setup.
Yeah, I've used that shot on a couple things since.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Whenever we're talking about live streaming, it ends up being the shot we use.
Yeah.
It's in a couple places.
Okay, so. Boy, I don't know how many people are still listening, let alone how many people have been listening for 100 episodes. But thanks for tuning in, maybe for the 100th time. And we'll see you all real soon. Big thanks to everyone for listening. Big thanks to MPB for sponsoring, and extra big thanks to anyone who's listened to all 100 episodes. If you have listened to all 100 episodes, I'd love it if you sent us an email, editor@videomaker.com. Just really curious if any of you out there have done that. So for Chris Monlux and everyone here at Videomaker, I've been Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast. We'll catch you next time.